Black Gold, Texas tea.
This is the top part of a oil and gas lease purchase report, or LPR, for anybody who's not in the oil industry. And this is what we broke down last time. Now, this is what we like to call form data, where we have a label and a value. And there's a lot of great information here because an LPR is created when a landman summarizes the lease for us. Okay, and the MOR summarizes the tract data, or a mineral ownership report summarizes that tract data for us. And so last time we took that LPR and that MOR and we made this spreadsheet right here, where we pulled out a whole lot of information, you know, the extension due date, the amount per acre, bonus amounts, royalty percentages, location information, if some certain clauses that the landman had thought was important was there. You'll see there's a lot of blanks because there was not a producing well on there. There are no residential water lines on this property, that kind of thing. Who the lease is with, Joey Johnson Jr., and their address, for example. So we created that spreadsheet. What we're going to be doing in this webinar is we're going to be taking this oil and gas lease, which has an addendum to it, right? Most oil and gas leases taken within the last 30 years, at least, have a exhibit, addendum, amendment to them. All right, so we're taking this lease, which is 5 pages for the body plus amendment, and we're turning it into this spreadsheet right here. And we'll get into how in just a little bit. But before we do, we want to take a look at this because like any contract, because that's what a lease is, like any contract, the lease needs natural language processing in a platform like Grooper to be able to read it. This isn't form data. We don't just have a label that tells us, oh, this is the legal description. But as someone who has been a landman and been a lease analyst, I know this is my legal description right there. I have to teach Grooper that that's a legal description. And Grooper can learn, hey, that's where a legal description is on the page, or that's what a legal description looks like. Here's how I identify a legal description in case it moves around where it is on the page. Maybe the first paragraph is longer or shorter, for example, so it's not in the same spot every time. Most contracts are a little fluid, even if they are semi-structured. You know, they have a specific flow to them, but not every paragraph is always the same length. And so you need a system that's flexible enough to do that. And Grooper does that. The reason that I love Grooper is twofold. One, it puts me in control, and two, I don't have to be a full-time programmer. So to dig into that a little bit, a lot of machine learning platforms these days, like Google TensorFlow, require you to be a pretty good programmer, whether it's Python or Go or C#, whatever language it may be. You're going to need to know some programming to use TensorFlow, or Amazon has one, Microsoft, all the big IBM, all the big companies have some really cool AI platforms that require a programming staff to run. And then you have other systems that don't require any programming and don't really require or allow you to think much on your own. You tell them what you want and they give it to you, and if they're wrong about something, well, good luck to you. Or if you want something different than what they gave you, then you have to go back to square one and they do all the work, and then you just get the results. And there can be long delays in that. Grooper doesn't have either of those problems, in that inside the Grooper system, if you know how to use it, you can create and edit your own data models, or you could have somebody like me and the crew here at PNP create stuff for you and work with you to get things done very quickly, so that if you see an issue, you get to address it inside the system. And there's two main parts to Grooper. There's the building the model, extracting out data part, and then there's the running the program part. And any lease analyst, landman, division order analyst, land tech can run the data processing and review portion of Grooper without having to know any of the technical sides of how data is extracted to verify data. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. Yeah, so I just want to show kind of the end result inside of Grooper, and then we'll get to how we got here. Okay, and so we're pulling out about 50 things out of this lease. And these are things that I had a lease analyst and a land manager get together and decide what's important to pull out of a lease. What do they want to see? What would the lease analyst be doing if she did this by hand? And so, and I say she because the lease analyst I use happened to be a female. But we went through the lease. We said this is what's important, and I want to show how Grooper captured that. So we have some basic information here, the lease date. Now it's in the lease as the 31st day of August 2013. I had Grooper reformat that for me to 8/31/2013 because that's how I need it on my import into a land system. My goal here is to create a spreadsheet that can be used either as a lease schedule or as the basis for an import into Quorum, iLandman, Inertia, Integra, any of these land systems, right? And if you marry that lease data with the track data from the MOR, you can import into the track-based systems, like LandPro or iLandman is a track-based system as well. There's other ones too. I won't, not to offend anybody, I'm not going to name every single oil and gas land system out there. But if you can import into it with a spreadsheet, Grooper can make that spreadsheet for you. Okay, so we got here the lease term, 3 years. You can see we jumped down a couple paragraphs. And it's formatted as 3 years, but if I wanted to, I could tell Grooper to reformat it as 3YR or 3Y, or however I needed it for my system imports. Let's see, I've got the owner name, I've got his address. You know, this just jumped back up to the page. So I'm not necessarily having to pull everything in order that it's in my document.
So Kyle, the workflow for the land analyst then is to look at the data, and I think you said this, but you know, we're looking at the data on the left-hand side that has actually been extracted, but then I see on the right-hand side, you've got that green box, which shows exactly where it came from in the document itself.
Yes, thank you. This is what a lease analyst or landman or DOS, whoever you're having review the data, this is what they would be seeing if you want a human to review it. And you can see here on the lessee address, the data wraps more than one line. And yes, it highlights it, and then the analyst can look and see, are there any typos? Did it pull the right thing? Did it catch everything that you expect it to? We've found that with this process, we're able to increase our lease analyst efficiency up to 400%. So our lease analysts usually, when entering data into a land system, get between 8 and 12 leases done a day. So that's going to be on average 10 leases done a day. With this, they're able to get 4 to 6 leases done an hour. So a 50 lease project, instead of taking us a week, now takes a day and a half to get done. So we can just continue through here. Chambers County, we're pulling the gross acres from one paragraph, and then it is repeated again in the legal description, but it's part of the legal description. And we're not going to get into the inter-grouper data validation in this webinar in detail. We're going to get into it in real detail in the next webinar, so come back for that. But we're going to show how you can compare data within one document to itself and see if the document, quote unquote, agrees with itself. So for example, I was looking at a lease last week where it was recorded in one county, but the legal description was in a different county. That's something that Grooper could catch and flag for us and let us know, hey, this got recorded in the wrong county. We need to send it off for recording in the correct county. So that kind of inter-grouper inter-document data validation is what I'm talking about. So
Kyle,
yes.
This document looks pretty clean. Compare the quality of this document with, you know, maybe overall document quality that you see, and how big of a struggle is it getting to this point right here where the software can actually read the text?
Sure. So I'd say this one is a pretty average document quality. You'll see here at the bottom that it's at 600 DPI, and that's because it got upsampled to 600 DPI. The native PDF that we were looking at is actually 200 by 200, which is kind of the scanner standard for documents. And so as long as you're at that 200, you should be good. Of course, with poor document quality, something that's been faxed and scanned, emailed, compressed, you can have issues. But one of the really cool things with the way Grooper's natural language processing works is even if not everything is spelled correctly, because it's not necessarily keying off of just one keyword, it's looking at a whole paragraph for intent, there can be some misspellings and it still pull out the correct answer for you. But you're going to get a typo. Like I see a typo right here in my proximity to structures clause. This says lessoffs, Lessoffs. It misread an R as an F. You know, that is a typo. Now that's something that, oh, I clicked on the wrong one, sorry. That is something that a lease analyst, when looking at it, can come in here and correct. And then when it gets exported, there would no longer be a typo. And so that's what our lease analyst is doing here in this process, is they're able to just go here, verify the data, and open it up. And you know, you can style this review portion here so that the boxes are bigger and everything else. I just made it simple to try to all fit on one screen here for this webinar purpose. Here, let's before we get into the meat of exactly how I pulled this out, I want to show some key things that got pulled out. This one is a cessation of production. You'll notice this is not an entire paragraph. It's just a portion of a paragraph. We can see that we have a 90 consecutive days, right? So 90 days for our cessation of production versus our royalty clause. Now, here on the right-hand side, if you read paragraph 3, you'll notice that's our royalty clause. But our exhibit has a clause that overrides the royalty set in the, or I'm sorry, our addendum has a clause that overrides the royalty in the body of the lease with a new one. So we're identifying that whole paragraph, and then we're pulling out the new royalty of 25%. You can see here I've converted the 1/4 to 0.25, again, because that's how most land systems are going to want to see it. Or inside Excel, that's also very easy to change to 25%. You know, that kind of thing. And then the lease analyst might notice some stuff that you may not think of off the top of your head, but Grooper will look for all these things in every lease that you put through your model here. So there's a royalty terms portion. What would that mean? Oh, and then this just flags and lets the lease analyst know, okay, payments are due within 120 days or else you're subject to a 12% penalty, 12% interest rate. Okay, that's some good stuff, and that's stuff that a lease analyst would capture, but it's not part of every lease. And Grooper is able to look for that, and if it doesn't find it, then it would just be blank. Now, that's where we had the exhibit clause replace the body clause, right? Because it overrode it. But that's not always the case. Sometimes, like with this shut-in, which is also in paragraph 3 of the body, there is a counterpart clause or amending clause in the addendum that doesn't override it, it just adds some more context to it. Okay, and it can be hard to read with all these blue lines around here, but you'll be able to see that that is related to the shut-in clause. But what are those key parts of the shut-in, right? Well, that it's a 90-day shut-in, and we're pulling that from the body of the lease, that it's $1 per net acre, again from the body of the lease. But what that addendum paragraph adds is that there is a 2-year limit to that shut-in. And so those work together to provide the data that you need. Now, I'm not going to go line by line through every single one of these, just for anybody worrying about that, but I do want to highlight a few cool things. You can do true falses with here. Just, is there a pooling clause? Yes or no? Yes, there is. It's identified because someone was granted the right to pool or unitize. So that's true. And if you want the whole pooling clause, again, you can pull that whole paragraph. If there's something in the exhibit that amends without replacing, you can pull that. And if it were to replace it, you can have it do that replacing like we saw with the royalty. Let's see. You can see here again where we have a whole paragraph with the proximity to structures. But the core information there is you got to be at least 200 feet away from the house or barn. You know, you got to be 200 feet away from a structure to, or whenever you drill. Now let's look down at our pew clauses. So the way I was raised, the way I was taught pew clauses was you base it on how it's cut. So here we've identified a vertical pew clause as paragraph 16 and the horizontal pew clause as paragraph 17. If you have an inverse definition from me, as some people do, then you can change the way Grooper understands those definitions. Again, Grooper puts you in control. You're not forced to use its dictionary of terms because you're creating the terms. But I see something really interesting. This has a pew of 100 days. That's not normal, right? Normally we see 30, 60, 90, 180, 1 year, 2 year, those kinds of things. This says 100 days. Well, that's because that's what the lease says. It has 180 inside the parentheses, but the words just say 100. So the person creating this lease, there was a typo, unfortunately. Now, I may know that, okay, well, this is supposed to be 180, so I could change it right there. Again, you just change it and you're good to go. And that's how it exports. You know, you might want to file a correction on this, but I'll leave that up to you for that part of the process. This is just about extracting the data that's in there. But you can set up a validation rule where if it's not a number that you would expect it to be, like 180, it can flag that as pink. That's that intergrouper data validation that I mentioned. Here we go. 100 feet below the deepest producing horizon. Great. You don't have to pull out the whole paragraph like I did here, though, right? I pulled out the vertical pew clause, 180 days. Horizontal pew clause, 100 feet below. You could just pull out the core data and ignore the rest of the paragraph. So here, I've got a kicker. I've got an option to extend for 3 years at $325 per net mill acre. That's really all that I care about in this paragraph, or all that the land manager cared about in this paragraph. They don't need the whole one. They know that it needs to be filed before the lease expires. That's standard. So just how long is it for and how much is it going to cost me is what they want to know. Here's another really cool one. Restricted minerals. Now that may not sound like a really cool paragraph, but you'll notice here, this is 2 paragraphs. So here, Grooper has acknowledged that both these paragraphs are about restricting the minerals that this lease covers. And I'm going to click on the field above so it won't be highlighted green, but it'll be easier to read. Paragraphs 20 and 21 here. Both those have to do with restricting the minerals that this lease covers, and they're both in the addendum, so they need to be presented together. And so Grooper is able to say, okay, let's put these 2 paragraphs together. Now that's very similar to this damages clause, okay, which is very cool, that it's 2 paragraphs that are identified as damages clauses, but unlike the restricted minerals clause, they're 2 paragraphs that aren't next to each other. So it's all highlighted green because they can only draw one green box at a time, but you see all those blue squares? That's what it's recognized as the damages clauses, paragraphs 24 and 27. And in the export here, you can see 24 reads all of 24, and then 27. It does not pull out 25 and 26, which it's saying are not part of what this land manager identified as wanting. Though I could see 26 being called a damages clause, but didn't meet the criteria of what they wanted pulled out. But this is where you, as the user or the person in charge of the project working with someone like PMP or somebody else on your team, decide what you want to see, what's important to you. Let's see, we got a favored nations clause, we got a force majeure clause, notification. This one's pretty cool. The whole paragraph, right? But why would you need to notify somebody? Why would you need to notify the lessor? Because of a change in operator, and you got 30 days to do it. So, you know, these key elements it can pull out. So yeah, so that's kind of an overview or a summary of what it's pulling out. I'd like to get into why, or how, how I'm pulling that stuff out. So before I get real technical though, just want to see if anybody has any questions, or Jesse, if you have anything. I know I was talking quick on some of those.
Will you hover over that green box on the right-hand side? I noticed it says confidence score 100%. What is that telling you something, or is that something you'll get into later?
No, let's get into it now. So the confidence score is how closely the answer matches the rules that I gave Grooper. And so here, change of operator is one of the predetermined reasons why somebody would need to notify somebody that I put into my list of why somebody might need to get notified. And so because it matches 100%, it's 100% confident that that is a possible answer. But if I get into something like, let's look at this restricted minerals clause. And this is where natural language processing comes in and fuzzy logic comes in. But you'll be able to see here, we are at restricted minerals 76% confident. Okay, now that is Grooper saying, I'm 76% sure that this is what you want to see as restricted minerals, based on what I've taught it a restricted minerals clause is. And I've told it, show me anything that you're at least 70% sure on for this one. And that percentage might vary. I think for the Pew clauses, I said anything that you're above 50% confident in, show me that as the answer. You'll notice on some of these where there are some pink, and that's where I didn't put the rules in. And let me show you one of those. I wanted to leave that in on purpose, so I'm glad you brought this up here. Let me find one real quick.
And while you're doing that, and this question may need to be for here in a minute, the section there where you showed those notifications, I don't see a place for multiple notifications. How would it handle that?
Well, so for that, you just need to teach it that multiple notifications are possible. And so you give it some examples to teach it the rules of how to recognize that, and then it is able to account for that in the future. So you just have to show that it is an option. I need to come back to this water use one for something else, but there we go. Here's what I was looking for. So this one, I did not put the rules in there where I said, only show me something that you're X percentage confident in. And so it's showing me everything that it identified as a paragraph. But because it's pink, it's saying, we know this isn't the answer. But I didn't ask it to remove that coloring for me. So just wanted to show you guys that one. Water use. I want to show you something here on water use, which is really interesting. And this will actually be easier to see on this lease packet. But let me show it to you here first. When I go through this water use clause, I noticed that there was a typo that Grooper was pulling out, and it misspelled the word wells. It had WEL1S right here. Now highlight that for you. Okay, WEL1S. Now, I know that's supposed to be wells. You know that's supposed to be wells. I can change that to wells. But why would Grooper pull that in? Well, this is where you can take a look and see not to talk bad about any landman, but just some of the quality of work that's done there. When we look at this, here is that same water clause, right? Fresh water, blah, blah, blah. Wells, right there. It was in the lease with the number 1 in it. And I can see in the paragraph above it, obligations has a 1 in there. So there were some typos in the lease. That's because humans aren't perfect, right? But a computer will do what you tell it to do. So when I'm running Grooper and telling it to look for this water clause, it'll look for a water use clause in every single lease that I put through it. And if it's there, it's going to find it. And if it's not there, it won't find it based on the rules that I give it. And so when you have a person doing it as good as any analyst is, as great as I, you, or whoever may be, we make mistakes. The only time the computer makes the mistake is when it was told to do something the wrong way. So we've also seen a great increase in accuracy when using Grooper to automate reading through these leases, because it's looking for everything on the list every single time. Okay, I'm going to click stop on this, and
So,
we'll get
Kyle,
into the data model. Yes.
before you do that, one question that I think will answer that we're being asked. What you're showing us is the user review portion. So this is what the land analyst is going to be working through.
Yes.
How would an end user interact with percentages that are maybe outside of the threshold that you set? Is that where some of the flagging comes into play? Or, if it's below that 50% or 70% threshold, how does an end user work with that? Because they don't really know the percentages. They're just looking at the data.
Right. So if I had in here, like, let me go pick one, for example, and we can see, let's see, let's look at this assignability clause, just to make sure that it is assignable, right? And we'll see what percentage we have here. So it's 62% confident in here. Let's say that I put my threshold at 65% confident for assignability. This is where you need a subject matter expert working with you to say, how much variation can be within an assignability clause, and where you're going to want more than one example when you're setting up your rules and guidelines for how Grooper identifies, in this example, an assignability clause. You want to give it a couple different examples to account for variation. But let's say I'd set that at 65. This would just show up as blank. And so in that case, when our lease analyst notices, hey, there should be an assignability clause, that's pretty standard, and Grooper didn't find it, they flag it and they let the Grooper tech know, hey, there's an issue here. And so rather than mark it, they review these one lease at a time. So instead of hitting complete task, they would stop right there. That exits out of the program, or exits out of this portion of the program, I should say. And then they submit a little ticket to the Grooper tech just saying, hey, on this lease, it's not finding the assignability clause. And then we have a choice to make. Is that a one-off situation? Maybe there's really bad OCR on that portion of the page for some reason, whatever it may be, and we need a human to go fill in that blank after we export it to Excel or inside a Grooper here in the view page. Or is this a issue that we can make an adjustment in Grooper by lowering that confidence down, or by teaching it a new variable, and now it has improved the system and won't make that mistake again? Like I said, the only time a computer makes a mistake is if it's been taught to make that mistake. So if I tell it, don't show me anything below 65% confidence, and I don't give it enough examples or rules on how to identify this assignability clause, then it's going to do exactly what I asked and not show me my option. So that's where you need a subject matter expert like a landman or a lease analyst working with the tech if they're not the same person. I'm blessed in that I have been a registered landman. I was a lease analyst for a few years. I've been GIS analyst for several years, and now get to work on this really cool stuff. So
that's cool, Kyle. Yeah, I mean, what you just described is the reality of AI getting better. You know, it involves a human retraining and teaching the system to do better. I mean, that's the only way, you know, in this scenario that AI is anywhere near self-learning. It's not. It requires human input to do better. And there's a question along those lines. You know, you talked about retraining that paragraph if it didn't show up. Is that something you'll talk about later, or how long does that take to retrain on a paragraph like that?
Yeah, I'll get into more detail in it later, but it can just take a couple minutes. Really, it takes longer to decide should we retrain it or is this a one-off than it does to actually retrain it. And the reason you might say, well, then why not just retrain it? Well, because you can overtrain the bot. You can teach it too much, and if you get too broad with your assignability clause, it might now start calling it a consent to assign, because if you've gotten real broad on your definition of consent to assign or notice to assign and real broad on your assignability clause, there might be enough overlap there that you're getting some false positives. So you want to make sure not to overtrain it. And that's where just, again, having a subject matter expert who's either the technical person or working with a technical person going together helps you avoid that little pitfall. The reason this paragraph isn't at 100% is because I didn't use this lease to teach the model how to read this paragraph. This is the same lease model that I started with 2 webinars ago when I ran over 2,400 leases through Grooper and we're pulling out the paragraphs. I took that same model and I reduced it to just the ones that I cared about and added the stuff that we weren't looking for during that webinar for this webinar. So, I built that model using leases from other counties and other states because we were looking at 6 different prospects for that 2,400 lease run. And this lease was not in that bunch. So it's, So whether this is a P88 or, P88s, there's variations within P88s, right? So, you don't have to have every single variation before you go into a project. I want to make that clear too. Again, you've got to deal with percentages and be a little flexible. But I just think that's so cool that I trained this thing 3 months ago on a totally different set of leases, and then I run this lease through it, and it nailed it, right?
Yeah, that's cool. That's pretty cool. So you do have a question on that, and you're going to get this one, and that's how many documents do you need to train the model?
That depends on a couple things. The biggest thing it depends on is the amount of variation within your project. And so I know for a fact for this assignability clause, I used 3 documents to train it. There are some clauses where I have used 1, and there are some clauses where I have used 7. It depends on, again, the amount of variation within that clause and how broad you're willing to get. And the higher that training number you get to, the higher risk you can run of false positives if you have closely related clauses. But really just a handful. What can be good is if you have a base model like we have here, is you take that and you run some leases through it and you see what didn't stick. And then you use those and just add 1 or 2 to it. And so you're just adjusting your model by 1 or 2 examples for every batch of 50 or 100 or 1,000 leases that you run through it. And that can work really quickly. And that way, you might spend a day or half a day adjusting your model before running through it. But if you're looking at entering 100 leases into the system and you just have one person doing that work, it might take them a couple weeks. And if Grooper can do that in a couple days, even if you add a whole day improving your model, you're still doing it in half the time.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah.
Hopefully
my answers aren't too long.
No, I think that's perfect. So now we're going to jump into the back end of this thing. And here's where I think one of the big differentiators of Grooper, really comes into play. And that is full transparency into how these models are working. And we actually get to see how the machine learning is working, why those different accuracy thresholds are displaying, and looking at the weightings of the machine learning training. And you can understand, did I overtrain? Did I undertrain? And it gives you full control of the results that you're getting. And so I know this is the stuff you love the most. So here we go, folks, into the back end of Grooper. This is where the models get built. This is where all of the training happens. This is really the power of the platform here.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with some basic information just to kind of show how complex some of these things can be. Dates can be written a lot of different ways. Here I've identified 6 potential ways that I've seen leases contain dates. And a lot of this comes from a base format extractor that is included with Grooper for dates, and I just modified that. Okay, and that's my value. And so this 31st day of August 2013, I know that that is my nth day of month year extractor right here, but I've got variations built in. So if I were to run this on a group of 100 leases that were maybe taken by 5 different landmen, they may not have all their dates styled the same, and that's 100% okay. Allowance for that has already been made inside the system. So when you're creating these, you have what's called regular expression. Regular expression's been around for a while. It's a mathematical way to write formulas, and basically it's a way to describe text. You're describing text with qualifiers, and I'll just break this down real quick, and we won't spend the whole time. This is not a regular expression learning course, but here we're looking for a day. That can be a number that's 1 or 2 digits. And then we've got a month that references our month name lexicon. I'm going to get to lexicons more in just a second. And then we're looking for a year, which again is going to be 4 digits for the way this one works. I could also make it to where it looks for 2-digit years, that type of thing. So this is regular expression, and then we've specified a output format to that way it's styled the same for me. But you'll notice I then converted that styling to 8/31/2013 after pulling out August 31st, 2013. So yeah, you've got a lot of power inside of Grooper here with how you want things to extract. And that way we can extract it ready to go into Quorum or iLandman or Inertia. If you've got that Excel spreadsheet template, and we've got the rules for how it needs to be pulled out for how your land department likes to use it, then we already know what format that date needs to be in, whether it's month, day, year with slashes or with dashes, that type of thing. All right, lessee, right? The lessee here is Legends Exploration LP. Now, I'm pulling that from a lexicon that I'm using. And a lexicon is a data dictionary. It's a list. And so I've got here a list of oil company names that I created, or that we here at PNP, it wasn't just me, it was a team effort, created, that has over 34,000 names of oil and gas companies as reported to state reporting agencies like the Texas Railroad Commission, the Oklahoma Corporate Commission, the North Dakota Industrial Commission. We collected all the oil and gas company names that report to state agencies, the 3 of them that reported to the state of Arizona, not a big oil and gas state. But we took all those names and put them into a list, and you can compare against that list. Now, I know this lease and this whole prospect that we're working with is in Texas. So I created a subset of that list that's just Texas, and it's got about 1/10 the number of operators in it, 3,500, a little bit more than 10% of the main list here. But these are all the oil and gas operators that reported operating or production information to the Texas Railroad Commission during the year of 2019 and the first quarter of 2020. We used those 5 published lists and created this. And so I'm comparing against these lists, and those two lexicons that I just showed you are actually available for download. PNP made them available for free on Grooper Exchange, which is the Grooper website for users. It's their user community site. The wiki is the learning site. The Exchange is the user community site. Under the download section, you will see a lexicons chat thread, and you will find a couple posts from me that have this and some other lexicons in there. If you work in a PLSS state, there's a BLM one that are great. Okay, so Lessee, cool stuff there. Let's take a look at some of these clauses. So let's take a look at this pooling clause. So what I'm doing here is I have my pooling clause set up to look only at the body of the lease. And then I have a second one to set up to look only at the exhibit to that lease. And that's where my input filter comes in. So I'm telling it what parts of the document I want to look at if I want to make a difference or a distinction between the two. So that's where my input filter comes in. I've told it, show me what you're most confident in, okay? And all that is based on a field class for pooling. Now you'll notice I have two pooling extractors, right? Pooling lease and pooling exhibit. But I only have one pooling clause field class. So I taught it one time. And then by using my input filter to differentiate between the body of the lease and the exhibit to the lease, I'm able to see just the one that I care about. And so here we go. Number 35, it's 70% sure that that is related to pooling. This one is 68% sure it's related to pooling. And so you can come up with your cutoff. Paragraph 16 talks about pooling. I'm not sure exactly what paragraph 16 is off the top of my head. Looks like continuous drilling, but you see that's where our cutoff would be, where we have that distinction. Now you'll notice I did not put a minimum confidence in here. As soon as I put a minimum confidence in here, all my false positives go away. And so that's those pinks that I was showing you earlier. Anything that's not what it's most sure about would show up as pink. By putting in my confidence, I now know based on the trainings that I've given this, and here's everything that's been trained on. If you're familiar with the TF-IDF algorithm, it's been trained on, let's see, 8,499 feature occurrences, 412 unique features within that. All that's to say, 412 words that it's seen over 8,000 times is what it was trained on.
So Kyle, so you're showing us here the the back end of the machine learning and the training to identify things. How is that different from the lexicon? And
sure. So the lexicon is saying these are the only things that can be an answer. That's what my lexicon is doing. What this is doing is this is saying these are the words that are included in this kind of paragraph and how important each of those words is to the intent of the paragraph. And you can base it on words, you can base it on stems of words, you can base it on groups of words, right? You might base it on what we call bigrams or trigrams, where you have, two words have to be working together to start having importance. But here I'm saying which words are the most important, or how important is each word to figuring out exactly what a pooling clause is. And so this pooling clause looks like I might have trained it on 9 total examples. I know I didn't train it on 29. Actually, I think I only trained this on like 4 or 5 examples. So these words just show up more than once inside each example. That's where that is. But using the TF-IDF algorithm, and then any adjustments that I make to the TF-IDF algorithm, like smoothing and stuff like that, I'm telling it how important each word can be. So by feeding it examples and training it on these examples, I'm not just teaching it, these are the only words that are allowed. I'm teaching it, using these words, you can figure out that the intent of this paragraph is to convey a pooling clause. And so now I'm shown my 2 pooling clauses. I've gotten rid of any potential false positives. and using my extractor with the input filters, I have separated them, one for the body and one for the exhibit. So I'll get into the spreadsheet real quick, if I may be given a couple more minutes, just to show how the extractions from this lease compared to the extractions from our LPR and MOR. Sound good?
Sounds great. So we're looking at the work product.
Yes. So this is the end result. So here I can see this is from the lease, and the way you get to this export is by running through all your steps in Grooper. Again, you go back to the part of the program that the lease analyst is running, and so you run through all your what's it called? All your progress bars here, and when you get to the database export at the end, you've got a SQL table that you convert to a spreadsheet, and boom, here we go. And so we see our lease date, 8/31. Okay, well, our LPR has a lease date in here, also of 8/31. And so this is a very manual way to compare. In the next webinar, I'm going to show you a more automated way inside of Excel to compare the two. And again, I'm going to show you how inside Grooper you can compare the two. But here I can see Joe E. Johnson Jr., Joseph E. Johnson Jr. Those are not an exact match, but I can tell those are the same. We've got a 3-year primary term in column B right here. And in my LPR, I've got a 3-year primary term. And so if I wanted, I could change my stylings so that they match, and then I'm good to go. But let's look at how everything exported inside of Grooper here. And one I want to show you in particular is 180 days for the Pew detail time. You remember how we changed it inside of that data review section in Grooper? So when you change it inside that data review section, that becomes the answer. It overrides what Grooper extracted with what the lease analyst tells it should be the answer. And then that's what it exports out to Excel. And so now I've got that answer inside of Excel. And now this is all my lease information for this lease, with entire paragraphs, the key elements of paragraphs, all on one line. And if I were to export to the inertia format or form format or whatever format, it would be able to suck right into those systems. And now your data entry has been reduced in time by 75%. Those kinds of efficiency gains is what we're talking about.
So
okay.
During the review, when the analyst is looking things over, can you set fields to be required? So let's say the confidence threshold is low, nothing got inputted, they cannot continue without putting something in there in the case where they didn't send it back for training?
Yes, you can. You can make any field you want required, and then the analyst will not be able to mark it as complete if there is not a valid value in that field.
Awesome.
So you like, not every lease is going to have a warranty deleted clause. Like this lease has a warranty deleted clause. I didn't get into the exact details of it, but inside the body of the lease, there was a warranty clause. But then in the exhibit, there was a warranty deleted. That's where you need a human being to say, okay, well, a warranty deleted is going to override the warranty. Let me read both of these and make sure I agree with it. Okay, this lease has no warranty to it. But warranty deleted should not be a required field because not every lease has a warranty clause. But lease date, lease term, the lessor, lessee, these kinds of things should be required fields.
What about fields that should be grouped together after output? And the example somebody asked about is such as section township range, where there could be multiple values.
So I've got a really cool model specifically for pulling out township range section legal descriptions. That's a really fun model. And again, you get the lexicons for that available on Grooper Exchange. But you can take and merge multiple extractions together back into one field. So you can see it exactly how you want to see it. So if you identify the township direction, the range direction, the section number, and then your quarter or lot calls as another thing, and then you want to put that into, say, the BLM second division identifier format, you can do that. And so for me, I needed 7 extractors, and I recombined it into one field.
Awesome. And then a question here that I know the answer to, I'm curious to see how you'd answer. Does the export generate a link to the extracted field and or document image?
Okay, does the export generate a link to the extracted field? So I think what they're asking there is that either inside the Excel spreadsheet, does the warranty deleted here link to the PDF and highlight the warranty deleted, or inside the PDF, will it title it warranty deleted? And the answer I have is not yet.
Not yet, but from what we know, Jesse, is that Grooper is working on creating PDFs that would be able to be tagged with metadata, and also be able to actually go directly to that warranty deleted or force majeure clause within the PDF. So that's something you guys are working on.
Yeah. Now, one thing you can do,
top secret, kind of.
Yeah, one thing you can do already is, along with your Excel export, you could add a field for document name and document location. And so it would show you where on your server or inside your content management system it pulled this document from, whether that's a SharePoint environment or Box.com or whatever. It can show you the path to this document and give you the document name. That's the closest answer for inside of Excel that I have at this time to that question.
Yeah, so be on the lookout for one of the newer versions of Grooper. I think it's coming out in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And that is going to create a fully bookmarked, fully intelligent PDF version of documents like this, where all of this data then gets attached to it and lives with the document throughout the document's life cycle. So that's something we're really excited about.
Yeah, which is really where we get to like document processor 3.0, right? Because we've had people here at PNP over the years that it's their job to bring in a banker's box and get it scanned and then tag everything. This is the lease, this is the plat, this is the assignment, whatever it may be. And Grooper is able to identify those and then split those out into individual PDFs or combine PDFs together as well. But getting that tagging inside of Adobe, man, that's another cool thing. That's another webinar where I'll go over time talking about it. Sorry, this stuff's cool.
Yeah, and we're excited to show that one off too. It's going to be, like I said, I think in the 2020 release. So I was chatting with somebody on here. So far in beta testing, the results have been outstanding.
Yeah, we are very excited to see the end results of that. And I think it's going to be a game changer when it comes down to the actual PDF will carry around the data that you can convert. Yeah. So soon we will get away from having to download directly from systems, and at some point you'll be able to digitally Dropbox exchange the files with the data with it automatically.
Yeah.
So,
Chris, it's always fun having you on at the end of these webinars. We've got over 30 people still engaged. Any last minute comments, anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, thank you everybody for joining us. You know, this is 20 years of my life in the making. I sat down with Kyle today and to express the importance of what you're seeing on your screen in Excel. Are they still seeing your clauses there, Kyle?
Yes, they should still be seeing that.
To express the importance of the amount of extraction that he was able to pull from this lease. The comparison of the LPR, the MOR, he'll be getting into lease data sheet comparison next, looking at plat maps, using the lease file itself to give you data is something that from day one when I started doing this business with technology was what I've always wanted to do. And so today is our first deployment of really showing the world something that Kyle and I have had in the back of our brains for a very, very long time. And with Grooper being invented and you guys' technology and our expertise, we were able to create something that I would be proud to show to my mother, who trained us all over here. I mean, this is something that she did back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And if she saw this today, it would be it would blow her mind. But the bottom line is that a question I asked Kyle earlier was on that lease, what was our fail ratio? As a manager, I think of Grooper work in 3 different ways. One being the fact that Grooper can read leases, read documents, read almost anything 100% and give you back data without any human interaction whatsoever, besides creating the models and prepping it. Then there's the middle one where, like Kyle said, it may have a failure ratio. Do we go back and fix the model? Do we just have a human type in the quick words because it's just faster, or it makes more sense that way? And then there's the third group that is such a poor quality of scan that no matter what technology is out there, whoever you believe in at the end of the day has not allowed us to invent that technology yet. So therefore, we still need our analysts out there to still key things into systems. But I asked him a question on this particular lease. I worked this lease myself back about 7 years ago. Probably around 2012, was that around the time?
2013.
2013, there we go. I'm still thinking. And I helped put a lot of these leases in with my team. And so I asked Kyle, what failed? What did you have to fix? And he said, nothing. And that's when he started showing me the wells with the number 1 in it, and how he was actually pointing out the flaws in the original document, not Grooper creating flaws. So what you saw today was, again, with model building, and we built our model against thousands of leases and across many states, and that's kind of an interesting scenario as well. But Kyle did not have to go back and audit anything in this, modify, I don't think a single thing at least, which was what he was able to create this record for. So now we have a lease schedule based on our lease. This is what I would usually get turned in by landmen out there in the field, my broker firms, all my friends out there. We created that from this right now. And at the end of the day, he also has loaded up the old MOR, and we're comparing our data within the data. Now we can take that and compare that to what's been put in the land system. If we have that data, if we don't, we're creating it now. And you can get as detailed as you want with this. You can get as broad as you want with this. Kyle showed some scenarios today of $325, 2-year extension. You add in a net mineral acre, and you can actually put in the total amount due, and now you're able to transform that into some kind of uploadable format into your system of record. I call them just data bank, and now you can flood that information. So
yeah, like a lease won't have the expiration date, but if you know the start date and the term inside Excel, you calculate the expiration date or the expiration date, and you're ready to go.
That's right. That's exactly correct. There's always, being a lease analyst, is how I started in the industry, was a question of, is the lease expire? If it started on 12/31/2999, does it expire on 12/31, or does it expire on 1/1/3000? What's the question there? And there's been conversations like that throughout 20 years of my life on what you should stick in, and go by this and go by that. I'm just using those as examples, but for those of you in participation today, you have just witnessed a machine which has been, trained by humans, extract into Excel all of the details from it, and now you can take it and you can look at it for yourself. You can, if you're an Excel professional like Kyle over here, you can pivot table and merge things together. And at the end of the day, as we are doing over here at PMP, we're running our releases through Grooper. We are uploading into our land systems, and our analysts are using Grooper interface to catch where Grooper can't do things, fix and help and remind Kyle and his team, the data wizards and the apprentices, to make models better for us. And at the end of the day, we're rarely typing into our systems now. We're doing more uploads and data configuration. So it's sped up my analysts. We're about a 90% efficiency ratio here. It's improved our timing. We're doing, it used to be about a lease an hour. Now we're around 4 to 5 leases an hour, easy, with everything fully loaded, not skipping a paragraph. So don't come ask me, later on for can we do consent to assign, because number one, I can answer that question very, very fast because it's already in our system. I won't have to go back through the records again. Feel free to ask about offset provisions. Feel free to ask about drilling provisions on the fly, because now you've loaded your system, and your analyst, your land manager should be able to create reports, or just straight out of Excel. Here's the list of leases with the 100 offset provision, 100 feet from the lease line. That's what we want to get to. So you're able to make your decisions fast, drill your holes faster, and make money. So I'm very proud to have Kyle do this. You did a great job, Kyle. Thank you guys for everybody for joining us today. And you can see the videos. If you've logged in, you can watch the past videos. We'll be sharing some videos through PPOGS. Grooper will be sharing some videos. And you may even see some of this stuff on YouTube at the end of the day. But there will be, please catch up on number 1 and number 2. This is number 3. You got number 4 and number 5 coming. Catch up with it. And if you want to talk more about it, email Kyle, hit me up on LinkedIn, hit Kyle up on LinkedIn, talk to Jesse, anybody at Grooper, and we would love to continue the conversation and see how we can help you become Landman 3.0, Lease Analyst 3.0, really just do the back office oil and gas of the future. And this works for everybody, guys, lawyers, landmen, lease analysts, geologists. If you're in the oil business, no lease, no grease, baby. And that's, we got to have the lease. So this works on contracts. This works on assignments. This works on PSAs, JOAs, AFEs, JIBs. I can keep going down the line, but the lease one, because of the legality of it and the clean nature, is amazing. So thanks, Jesse, for letting us do the webinar. We really appreciate it. And for those of you that are out there, like I said, contact us. We're ready to talk about it and share our experiences.